person who has the most power in any situation is the person who needs no power because they're self-sufficient.
How plastic are we really, David?
People will always default back to their default setting, which is their operating system.
Can we start with, what is a narcissist?
A narcissist is a person who is extremely self-centered, so it's all about them all the time. If you're looking at understanding it, it's a survival mechanism that they've developed for whatever reason. It's had to be about them. Blessed are those without expectation, for they shall have no disappointment.
Come and meet the behaviourist. David has spent his life studying personalities, personality types and character traits, and some of the findings are outstandingly helpful, definitely incredibly interesting, and he's helped hundreds, if not thousands of people through a bunch of issues. Come with me on this little journey where we're going to talk about narcissists, we're going to talk about character traits, we're going to talk about anxiety. Definitely worth a listen. Remind me again, David, of what you said a few minutes ago. The way you live, you've got almost that's a motto of some sort, isn't it?
Yeah, blessed are those without expectation, for they shall have no disappointment. That's my main key credo for life. I've got several rules I live by, and that's one of them.
Even to unpack that is quite an amazing thing if you can manage to grab hold of it and put it into action, isn't it?
It is. It's about noticing that life is not permanent. Everything around us changes. You mean, the things that are consistent are death, taxes, and change. Not in that order necessarily.
Sure.
So, in reality, if things change, how can I have an expectation of them staying the same?
I think rationally, most people would say, yeah, that makes total sense. But we don't generally live by it.
No.
Whether we're conscious of it or not, it seems that we tend to attach some expectation to almost everything.
We have to in order to survive, really. It's about survival. I specialise in biology, in the biology of humans. I'm the behaviourist. I have books online, etc. I'm an intimate partner profile, the only one in the world because I wrote the profiles. So at the end of the day, of course, there's expectation. We can't escape expectation, although it is good to be mindful that some things just aren't going to happen the way you want them to happen.
But isn't there a distinction, David, between having an expectation, which in the framework in my mind I think can be healthy, it's linked to boundaries, but having an attachment to that expectation to be able to say, well, it's got to be like this is potentially the path to suffering.
That's the one. It's the expectation. We might call it attachment to the fruit of the outcome.
That's very biblical sounding.
No, not biblical.
I didn't think so.
It's if I have an expectation of how an outcome should or should not be, I'm automatically in trouble technically because that creates, we could say it creates suffering, but what if I'm attached to not suffering? Then I'm really in trouble because I'll try to make happiness my expectation. And that's nigh on impossible as a human being because happiness is only the point between two pains. So most of our expectations are unrealistic.
That's so interesting. There's a T-shirt in that, David. Sandwiched between my two pains is my happiness.
Is my happiness, yeah. Literally. It's a habit and a pattern. Everything human beings do are, well, not everything, but almost everything are habits and patterns. As a profiler, that's what I study. I study the habits and patterns.
So tell me, I've got a whole bunch of interesting things, according to me, to ask you about.
Sure.
But talk to me about where you came from. How did you get to the point where you're doing what you do?
A slow progression of life experiences, I suppose. Through time and space, if that's even a realistic expectation. Through my life experiences, slowly but surely, and I have an interesting brain. I'm able to deconstruct everything. So naturally, I can deconstruct things down to base of whatever makes it up to a point. And that, then I reconstruct it and make sense of how it operates. So that's my this kind of intelligence I've got, is to be able to deconstruct things. So, at school they would tell me things that, if I was in any kind of place, I would be told things. But rather than take that on face value, I'd deconstruct it. And I'd ask the question, who benefits? It's one of my questions that I'll ask, who benefits? And what's this really about? And so living like that, asking who benefits and what's this really about, started to lead me to, contemplate life, shall we say, and from a bit of a different lens. And then it came down to a couple of things that were constant, fairly constant, and that's kind of where I grounded myself, my identity, so to speak, because we all have an identity that's a constructed reality. And I constructed my reality around my rules, or the way that I live life and how I understand it. And that's that's how I managed to create my profiles. Is I just deconstructed human beings down to basically 16 things that they're going to do that they will always do no matter what the situation they're in.
Oh, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and that's it. And, there's only so many ways you can respond to childhood trauma. There's only so many ways you can respond to relationship failure. There's only so many ways you can respond to certain things. And human beings, depending on certain factors, tend to respond the same. A little different but the same. And that difference is my profiles. And the sameness is what I call the operating system of humans, like how we operate. So we have an operating system. So I deconstructed things down to an operating system, like you might pull a computer apart and get down to, okay, well, I'm right down to the hardware, and right now I've got the CMOS, and literally there's a battery and a clock and some basic programming, or that the CMOS of the human being is kind of where I start my investigation of people. People will always default back to their default setting, which is their operating system.
How plastic are we really, David? Because if we said there's an operating system and there are default settings.
There are, yes.
And you've identified 16
16 people. There's actually more. They're the ones that are visible.
Yes.
There's what I call 4 hidden ones that are a little more tricky to identify and generally can be misrepresented. So those ones, those are different. But most of us come within the 6. This is intimate partner. This is relationship I'm talking about. Talking about how you relate to another human being. So that's what a relationship is, just that. So that's what it's about for me. It's about that. So how plastic are we? How neuroplastic are we might say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the earliest learning is the strongest learning. So that's where you start I call it default mode setting. That's where you just start your defaults. Your defaults are always around your operating system: safety, protection, procreation. The 3 primal drivers of humans. And so everything goes down to that. Remember the toilet paper crisis of 2019 during COVID, when people were hoarding toilet paper. What we might call rational people were suddenly hoarding toilet paper. Why? What's that about? Survival. Now, if there was no COVID and no challenge to their survival, would they hoard toilet paper? No, but they did. Human beings default when they're under extreme stress to the operating system. Take the teenager that's doing really well at school and suddenly they discover the opposite sex. The studies go out the window, things change. Why? Because they've discovered procreation, primal driver. But it's not a cognitive thing. I don't work in the logical mind. I work in the biology. I work in the operating system. Everything I do comes from there. So that's why I know at certain times people will do certain things. Not everyone, though. There's always outliers to every rule. So the neuroplasticity comes in, we learn and we develop habits and patterns of behaviour. Now there's 3 regions. There's a conscious mind, which is where we might have our willpower, our logic, that lot. It's about 1/3 of the operating system. It's the most energy intensive. Also, it's the last to get every memo. Right? Then you've got the subconscious, which is where all your habits and patterns are stored. In other words, if you drove here today, you didn't think about every single move you made, every heartbeat you had, every bit of sensory data that came through. It was checked against habits and patterns. So that's your subconscious. Then you've got your unconscious. It's like a big room of sensory data, but it's all jumbled up. And that's where your default modes are. So human beings think that they're consciously doing things, but often they're unconsciously conscious, right? So what happens is where you have a choice is where your neuroplasticity comes in. So let's say I've got a choice to, choose door number A or door number B. And I know door number A is a relationship failure because, door number A is a different model. And I know door number B is a relationship success, although it might be really difficult, but I know that model. But I still choose door number A. Why? Procreation, primal driver. Or I think, you know what? Of all the consequences of this, my empathy, my compassion, my response flexibility, my ability to change my behaviour, depending on the circumstances. Let's say my moral or ethical judgment, they're debatable, those words, but I'll use them. And I choose the other door, door number B. Then I have shown the ability to make change because I've consciously made a decision against my nature. So I'm like the human hacker. I understand the nature. So when someone goes against their nature and they've used their conscious mind, they've used their, not just logic, but they've really thought about it, deliberated, looked at all of the possibilities, then change is possible. They've made change. And that's where the wiring of change comes in. And the more change they make, the easier it becomes. And they make a new habit or pattern out of that.
So can the new habit override one of the primal habits? So it is possible to say, I was programmed this way. I can change my CMOS.
You can change. Yes, you can change your not your CMOS. Your CMOS is your basic functioning. However, you can change all the other bits and pieces associated with that. So if my base, because if we couldn't change our decisions and we just went off our nature, we'd all be basically animals. The difference between us and the animal is we can make a conscious change, whereas they run on instinct. Now, humans run on instinct too at their primal level. However, there are opportunities to make those changes, however uncomfortable that may be. We can still make those changes. Now, the newest change you make, like the most recent change, is the least wired in your brain, right? So your old habit is very wired. So that's where you get those feelings and the difficulty in your nervous system about, you'll get those urges or those feelings because you naturally want to follow your old habit, but you've got this new habit you're trying to create. And you've got to make this conscious choice to follow your new habit. The good news is if you keep making that conscious choice, you'll wire that new habit up as not as strongly as the old one, but your brain will start selecting the new one over the old one.
Does the old
more
one
automatically?
Do you know if the old one still exists in the background?
Yes, it stays there. The brain's the biggest hoarder ever. And it's not just the brain, it's the whole body is wired to record information. So the old stuff stays there, but it gets what I call file 13. Gets put back in the it could be useful one day.
It's in the black box.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Like you imagine let's say you've got a shed and you've got all these tools in there and you only use 3 tools out of the shed, but you've got all these tools and someone says, hey, you really need to get rid of those tools and you start fighting. You go, I can't get rid of those tools. I might need them one day. That's how we work.
Yep.
Because if you got rid of something and you needed it, you have to relearn it. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So it's like, okay, we're just going to store that and hold on to it.
That opens up so many opportunities for questions. But I want to go back a step. At what point in your life did you realise your, I'll call it a superpower, was to deconstruct things and start from the base? Was there a point that you remember?
There was a point I could probably identify, and it was when I first did my social work degree because I was asked to do psychology, but I have a little bit of trouble with mathematics and statistics, and I just don't have a brain for it. So my wife has a psych background, and she said, "Oh, Dave, you're just going to struggle." She said, social work at that time, you're talking 20 years ago or more, at the time they had no exams. I think they had one exam, Introduction to Psychology. You had to do a psych unit or something. She got no exams, it's just essays. And I said, "Oh, great, because I'm good at writing. And so I went, yeah, that's great. So, of course, consequently got a HD average through, high distinction average throughout. And I was sitting in the first lecture of social work. And the lecturer said, Pauline Mimaduma was her name, that's the Dean of Social Work, said, all right, this is the essay topic. And I'm like, yeah, first day, first lecture, what? Essay. I just knew. And she said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. That was the first essay topic. And I went, okay. And then she said there's two different pathways. There's a pathway where deconstructionist pathway, where we can deconstruct things down to their finest element, and there's a kind of constructionist pathway where we look at all the variables and just keep adding on top. And she said in this profession we look at all these variables and we keep constructing, and I'm like, my brain just couldn't go there. I'm like, hold on a second. If we keep doing that, don't we make it more complicated? If we make it more complicated, how can we ever understand anything? It's like driving your car and the little red light comes on and you don't know anything about the red light. And you go, oh, red light, pretty light, great, keep driving, warranty voided. But what if you understand what that red light means and you stop immediately and you call the appropriate mechanical service, as per the warranty? Well, I thought, we've got to be able to get down to the point where we understand that we have to call that person. And the only way we can do that is deconstruct down to the basic level of what's really driving everything. Because if something's really driving everything, everything else will be connected to it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And I went, you know what? That's me. And that's what I do. And you probably want, maybe you're even thinking, well, what's at the basic level? What's driving everything? Fear. That's the bottom of the pile. All unpleasantness is based on fear. Yeah. So at the end of the day, if I can deconstruct, name it to tame it, if I can make sense of it at its basic level and I can remember that that's the driving motivator, then all I've got to do is apply strategies to that and that'll fix it. Rather than go through all these complex processes of this, that, the other thing, and, oh, it happened because of this 20 years ago, but that led to that. Oh, no, that's probably that. Oh, my God, what a mess. I can't make sense of that. However, I can make sense of a primal process that drives unpleasantness. And so I started there and worked my way up from there.
And you didn't stop there, from what I've understood. You went on to study other things out of
definitely.
curiosity,
Yeah,
I'd imagine, after meeting you.
Yeah, I did,
Yeah. What were those things?
Well, when I first started social work, there was a kind of concept that we were basically welfare workers, and that kind of ticked me off a lot because my brain does not work there. I don't hand out blankets. I used to call us blanket counters in the hospital system when I ran the social work department, And we're not. We have a lot of skills, And a lot of our skills are psychologically based, although we just don't do as many assessments. Again, I'm not really that good at rats and stats. So I got to a point in my career where I was a therapist, I was doing therapy, and I realised that, wait a minute, this doesn't really work. And I had that kind of epiphany that what I was doing wasn't necessarily working. I'd already created my own model called the self-awareness method, which at the time I was constructing, again based on the core operating system of people. This was back in 2001. And a long time ago, that's model. And now you think of it. And so over the years, it was probably 10 years later, I was doing the bog standard processes and practices. And there's something missing here. And I thought, you know what? Time to step outside the box. Because that's me, I step outside the box. So I thought, let's study language. Let's look at the language we use therapeutically. And I thought, well, how do I study that? I can't literally study linguistics technically, because that's not something I felt that I'd be good at. And the closest thing to that was hypnosis. The closest to understanding the patterns of language was Dr. Milton Erickson's hypnosis. So I went and did a hypnosis course, and I found it fairly useful. And what I did is I pulled out the bits I need and threw away the rest. And so I only needed certain things. And then I did an NLP course, and I took out a couple of things out of that and threw away the rest. And I started to develop my own methods and techniques, which is what I've always done. I've always developed my own stuff. And I developed a system that worked really well, I believed. Yet I still didn't have a greater understanding of what I needed to understand, because I realised that men and women are wired differently, and I started to have a bit of a conundrum. How can we do things like couples therapy when people are processing language differently? It's almost an impossibility, because literally there's different processing going on for males and females, and this is scientific fact. This is real science, yeah. This is neurobiology. So basically I thought, well, I've got to understand that. So I went away and did more study into, how the brain works and how we do stuff. And then I thought, well, I don't really understand, and I've always worked in relationships, yeah. So I don't really understand exactly how couples work. So I started to study the Gottman Institute stuff, and I thought, I got to go a bit deeper, and ended up going down the deepest, darkest rabbit hole. The old dating literature from the old 1970s dating stuff. And I thought, hold on a second, these people are certainly onto something, although it's pretty nefarious, what they're doing. And I don't like what they're doing. However, again, I pulled out bits and pieces of that were useful. And then I developed a system. And that system I started to use to help people with social anxiety connect with other people. So I became what I call a connection coach. It's a fancy word for a dating coach. And I started doing that and having a lot of success with people with social anxiety, helping them get out there and find people and teaching them, and I'd started to study body language, of course, as part of that. I went down some other rabbit holes with a guy named Chase Hughes's work, Dr. David Schneider's work. So these were kind of more out of the box stuff. Did a course with him, studied his YouTube stuff. And Peter Navarro, body language, just a whole bunch of people who were really studying how humans operate, but not just from psychology, but from all walks of life, and some of them more questionable, and some of them, really would be evidence-based and accepted as quite legitimate. However, one of my other rules is you never throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yep. There's always something to learn, and you might pick up one thing out of that mob, and it could be useful, and that's what I found. There were useful things. And so I started teaching persuasion influence. I started teaching power and control dynamics. In other words, I had a lot of people coming to me who were in very bad relationships with narcissists and people like that. These are diagnosed, like not pop culture narcissism, but properly diagnosed personality issues. And I started helping them manage their situations or remove themselves from very difficult relationships. And, and as I was doing that, I started to notice over the years that there were certain ways people behave. People would come to me with a story. It'd be slightly different, but it'd be always the same root cause.
So, the underlying pattern
exactly.
was similar.
That's how I developed profiles. Is I just put all the similar patterns together and worked out that certain people fit into certain patterns. They do certain things due to certain influences in their lives. However, they don't much go outside those patterns. So it got to the point where someone could come in and I could identify very quickly what profile they were, and I could tell them about themselves. Say, oh, you'll do this, you'll do that, you'll do that. Your partner will be this, that, the other. And they'll go, how do you know? You're living in my life. How do you know? Well, I'm a profiler. So I started to become more just a profiler. Then my students said to me, "Oh, Dave, you got to write your profiles down because they're really good. You know, they work." Because I was using them on my connection coaching too to work out who would fit with whom. You know, if you're a turbo charmer, you're not going to fit with a queen. You're just not. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. If you're queen, you're going to fit with a wolf, and if you're wolf, you're going to fit with a queen. If blah blah blah. You know, so I made up really interesting titles for my profiles. You know, I made it a little bit more interesting. They're not based on psychology at all. They're based on my observations. However, they have a root in science, definitely, and I'm writing the art and science of the hidden profiles, or the hidden nature, I call it. So Hidden Nature, Art and Science is the book on how I got to where I got and the science I used to formulate it, and also some of the other stuff that I use to inform it as well. That's not necessarily, you know, it's a bit out of the box.
I think life is out of the box, though, isn't it? It's such an interesting thing that I observe, that when we say we have this discipline, let's call it psychology, and in that discipline, here's how we view it. And it often doesn't allow for outliers, or it doesn't allow for what if we're wrong.
Yeah, that's it.
Or it doesn't allow for, well, there are a whole other bunch of disciplines and things that happen in life which could affect this, but let's leave them out, because if we use this framework, which we can all agree on, then we can it becomes something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's... Yeah, and it's got value. I'm not devaluing it at all or minimising it, but I am saying that to some degree it can become myopic.
Oh, absolutely. You become siloed. And I noticed that when I was working in the department, that you became siloed, because I worked in mental health for quite a while. You became siloed into a way of doing things that was acceptable. In inverted commas, I got my air tags going, evidence-based. And but evidence is also a construction of reality. And evidence can be biased by interview or experimenter bias, and there's plenty. So evidence is still, we've got to still challenge evidence, you know.
Yes, yeah.
So at the end of the day, as I said, I lost expectation. I tried to diminish my expectations, and I work on what works. So my motto became, I'll do what works as long as I'm not harming myself or others, or really it's others or myself. That's what I do. I will utilise the techniques that have worked for people if it's useful to them and they find it appropriate.
That is the crux of it, though, isn't it? What works? What works?
Yeah, well, what works? I mean, if there's a Panadol and an aspirin in front of you, and aspirin works, but it's going to thin your blood, and you always take aspirin and you thin your blood, well, you might have a problem, with an arterial bleed. But then someone says, I'll take the Panadol, it doesn't thin your blood, I'll probably do the similar thing to get rid of your headache. Oh, no, I can't do that because I've always taken aspirin. But there's some problems with that. There's probably problems with the other one too. You take too many of these, aspirin, Panadol, and it could affect your kidneys. However, it's still going to do the same thing, so why not we just try the Panadol and see how we go? So we take the Panadol, gets rid of the headache, you don't take too many, you don't thin the blood, and you go, that actually worked a bit better. And I didn't harm myself or others. That's one of my rules. I don't harm people, self or others or self, whichever way you want to put it around. So my techniques are a little different. My profiles are certainly a little different. Although they work. People love them. And so that's it, That's what I've been doing, I'm still doing it. I've just finished the sixth volume of our profiling, the dramatics, which is our narcissists.
Can we go there for a moment?
Sure.
I'm privileged to have so many conversations with people, and narcissists do come up surprisingly regularly.
Yeah.
Are narcissists born as narcissists?
Well, it's a debate. My personal opinion is there's a genetic component to all of us. There's a modelling component because we learn by modelling, not words. In other words, if a behaviour is modelled to you and in your operating system, it's because all behaviour is functional to meet a need, right? So if it's modelled to you by a significant other, that behaviour, and it gets a response, then there's a good chance you'll pick that up as a viable behaviour, as a useful tool. And this isn't conscious either. This is all in the unconscious and subconscious, yeah. And then, of course, there's choice. That's the third element, is choice. In other words, you've got a logical mind and you can choose a behaviour because it's either deemed right or wrong. It either hurts others or does not. So narcissism is probably in all three boxes. But like anything, there's a spectrum.
Can we start with, what is a narcissist?
Well, if you want to, and again, I'm going to deconstruct things.
Yeah, please.
Because I don't find it useful to go into a whole bunch of diagnoses or elements of diagnoses because they all run into each other, actually. And I've been working in mental health for years, and I use the ICD-10 and the other DSM-5 or 6, I think it is now. All that lot. And again, I have to do that for my profession at times. So what is a narcissist? A narcissist is a person who is extremely self-centered. So it's all about them all the time. That's really what you want to think about. That's, if you're looking at understanding it, it's a survival mechanism that they've developed for whatever reason. It's had to be about them. And, of course, they've learnt that behaviour, and maybe there's a genetic component too, and then a modelled component. So this person has come out in the world where they're looking for advantage everywhere. They're looking – they're wired differently. So they see the world as what can I get out of it. Now, sometimes that's conscious, thinking what can I get out of it, and often it's how does it affect me. So when a narcissist makes a decision, it'll be how does it affect me primarily before how does it affect you. Narcissism has other elements, of course. So we've got elements of extreme attention seeking. Because go back to biology. I'm only biologically correct, not politically correct, right? So in biology, you got two birds in a nest, one squawking and making a noise, feed me. The other one's silent. Which bird ends up starving?
Silent one.
Silent one. So you'll notice in your life that the one that makes the most noise gets the most attention. The one that often appears to do all the right things gets very little attention. Isn't that interesting? So what if someone learned that even if I make a noise and it's painful to others and painful to me, yet I still get a response because in their life they're very minimised, or they've got a situation where they don't get the correct, appropriate, connected caregiving, then they've learnt that I make this noise and you respond to me. But the other thing you do is when I make a noise and I'm a victim, you give me sympathy. You give me empathy. Isn't that interesting? So I'm going to make this noise and I'm going to be a victim, a constant victim. I'm constantly going to need your sympathy and your attention. Yet at the same time, I can never get enough of that. It's like a black hole. So what I'm going to do is if you start to draw away from me, I'm going to make it even more painful for you. Because if I make it more painful, sometimes people keep coming back. Like I learned early on, people keep coming back. So clearly, therefore, I can keep this going until you disengage from me completely, but then everything's always everyone else's fault. Everything that happens to me is everyone else's fault because I'm always in pain. And we have a thing called emotional refraction where we filter through our feelings. And so if I'm always in internal pain and I'm looking at you and I'm feeling internal pain, you can become responsible for my feelings. Now, what if you've learned to never look at your own self? To never look inside and go, you know what, how much is this is about me? Because that never happened. That was never modelled to you. You never saw that.
Yep.
Or, you didn't learn that. So everything's always about other people because they're always hurting me. So therefore, it's always about them. So when I create a behaviour to try and get your attention, which is painful to you, and you respond and react to that, and it causes more pain, therefore it must be your fault. You're causing me the pain, therefore you're at fault. But also the government's causing me the pain, or the society's causing me the pain, or the job's causing me the pain. It's always about something else. And we call it insight. So they lack insight. And this person is also, can be quite grandiose. They can appear really quite confident. They can appear quite like, they know what they're talking about and they're a real go-getter. They're this, they're that, the other thing. But meanwhile, inside, they're extremely vulnerable. The most unhappy people are the most vulnerable people. The most angry people are the most vulnerable people. Because all you see in behaviour is someone defending their vulnerabilities. That's what behaviour is. So behaviour that's unpleasant is a defence of a vulnerability that they were never able to process during early life. So as an adult, they protect it. They protect it, they protect it, they protect it. And what they do works, because if I get angry at you and you back off, that worked. If I get angry at you and you fight with me, more attention. If I get angry at you, and we kind of come to some impasse and you disengage from me, but you come back, well, I still win. So at the end of the day, this person called a narcissist is someone who has learned this way of being to protect vulnerabilities, but also this is the way they exist in life. This is how they roll, I might say. People will always ask me this question, David, can they change? And I will say, depends on how far up the spectrum they are.
I was going to ask a very similar question to that. You've broken it down beautifully. But for me, it's a nuanced question. Does somebody who is, let's call them a higher level narcissist, have the capacity to develop insight?
No. I'll just say no. I've never seen it and it doesn't exist because...
It's almost counter to how their way of being, isn't it?
Well, your brain's wired differently to theirs. Narcissism is a protection mechanism. So imagine if you had to make people aware of you. You had to get your needs met and you did it painfully, but you still got your needs met. And you were to drop that behaviour, what happens to your identity? Because your identity is based on that. That's your core. Everything's about identity, the core identity we create. In my profiles, you have 3 identities, default modes. Default mode setting, your primary adaptation and your secondary adaptation. So your default mode setting is what you default back to when you're really distressed. Unless you can cognitively change that, right? You can with a lot of work. But then you've got other adaptations that you learnt during your life to meet certain needs, get certain resources, yeah? So if the core of the identity of this person is high on the spectrum is that narcissism is their way that they get their needs met, whether they're conscious of it or not, you're challenging that. That's why they can never be wrong, because you're challenging their identity.
Yeah.
You're challenging, they construct reality based on what they experience. Therefore, their reality always must be proven right. So they can be talking to you, telling you did something you never did, you acted in a way you never acted, but in their world you did, because their reality must be right, because otherwise their identity is now being challenged. And when you challenge someone's identity, you start to remove the scaffolding of their life. And it's dangerous. People can end up not being here, literally, if you start removing that scaffolding. I just wrote about that yesterday in the Dramatics book. Literally, I was writing about that.
I can imagine then, using the framework of personalities and profiles, that a narcissist would almost select a profile of a person that would play into their needs.
They'll naturally know. It's more intuitive.
Yeah, okay.
As I said, it's a spectrum, because we're not really going into psychopathy. A psychopath selects. They're not necessarily a narcissist, though.
Yeah, okay.
Right? They might show certain traits, but they are much more calculating. They're my calculating profiles of those people. Yeah. So they're more calculating. Narcissists are more reactive, but although they do have the ability to naturally know whom is going to meet their needs. And there's 2 kinds of people they'll go for: very strong, independent people or very needy people.
Well, I'm surprised about the strong and independent. Needy, I would have thought, yeah, that's a natural fit. I could see how that would play. The strong and independent.
Yeah. Because part of what the narcissist needs to feel loved is complete compliance. So when they meet a strong and independent person and they're attracted to them, remember I work in intimate partner relationships.
Yes.
I'm talking in relationships.
Yeah.
They have to break that person down and make them an automaton. In other words, a person who physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, culturally, and sexually meets their needs and complete compliance. So it's actually a challenge to the narcissist. This is high-level narcissists.
Yeah.
We're talking high level, not garden variety, right?
Yeah.
They're not doing this like this. They will be attracted to a person who shows those independent traits, and they'll begin to break them down.
And is that an unconscious or subconscious thing?
In the high-level narcissist, is quite conscious. In the more lower level, it's more of just a result of the behaviour.
Yeah.
So that real high level, I call them a dramatic narcissist, the really high level right at the top of the spectrum, they will break you down. And they will isolate you, they will split you from people, they will utilise gaslighting, they'll utilise manipulation, they'll utilise domination, which is aggressive behaviour, threats or even physical violence towards you. They'll do a whole bunch of things in that area, and they're now moving more into my calculating profiles. They're kind of now crossing over into that domain, right? Whereas if we go down to our garden variety ones, they're kind of that person who's self-centered and usually or almost always has complex trauma, and it's the way that they've managed their trauma as a child. It's a response to their trauma. Now, don't think that the high-level narcissist also has complex trauma too. It's just that their need for power and control is greater. So the more controlling a person is, the more they'll develop these calculating or narcissistic types of behaviours to control their environment, because everything is about power and control. Another one of my sayings. Now, this is the saying that I coined a long time ago. The person who has the most power in any situation is the person who needs no power because they're self-sufficient. Our identity is literally created by what's reflected to us by others. It's literally how we become who we are. They treat you nice, you're loved, cared for, therefore you survive. If you're treated horribly, you're not loved, not cared for, therefore you'll die. So you'll develop behavioural strategies subconsciously and unconsciously, or even consciously, to try and get that need met. And you'll find at the core of all human beings is fear of that abandonment, that not being cared for, that technically love. They're not getting what they need. So it's a fascinating topic. I can go on for days about it. I run workshops on it. I mean,
I'm not surprised. It's complicated, isn't it?
It is complicated. This is a complication I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And, I could make it even more complicated. Although at the end of the day, it all boils down to fear and patterns and habits.
And the outcome, I think, so where this conversation came from a few days ago was somebody was talking to me about being in a relationship with whom she identified as a narcissist and was finding it very difficult to get out.
Well, then she sees me because I help them get out. But the hardest thing for any of my students, because I only have students, because I teach, I don't therapeutize. I teach people how to manage controlling and difficult behaviours. That's what I do. The hardest thing for them is to understand how the narcissist works, because their brain's different. So they keep thinking like them, but the narcissist is thinking completely different. So they keep repeating over and over and over again the horrible behaviours this person does. But all that does is keep them in the relationship by repeating that stuff, because they can't understand it. Oh, maybe they'll change. Oh, maybe they'll change. Because it's a push-pull relationship. Love you, hate you, rapid cycling. So, he loves me because he's been nice to me. Oh, no, God, he's been horrible to me, he hates me. Oh, but now he loves me, now he hates me. Oh, he loves me, he hates me. And now it doesn't stop, and it keeps a normally wired brain engaged in the hope that it will change, because in the past it wasn't always like this. That's usually the very early days, yeah. Now that's normally wired brain, thinks like that. That's why people stay in these relationships, because there's some kind of hope that this is going to change. However, I'm going to say it's not. While you give the narcissist their narcissistic supply, in other words, the attention they need, and it's a specific type of attention. So you're giving them this supply, they're constantly going to be wanting that supply, and if you stop giving it to them, they start gaslighting, manipulating, being aggressive.
It's like a drug addict.
It is. It's a supply. Yeah. It's a feeling. Everything human beings do is in relation to a feeling. Dr. David Schneider will tell you that. So everything we do is in relation to a feeling, not a thought, a feeling. Feelings come before thoughts. So when you were 6 months old, you were having feelings, but were you having thoughts? Of course not.
I couldn't tell you, David.
David,
I can't even remember what happened yesterday, let alone 6 months ago, when I was 6 months old.
Why weren't you having thoughts? Because you had no language. How can you have thoughts if you can't construct them into a language? So thoughts start coming about to make sense of stuff. But again, thoughts are constructed through your feelings. Yeah? How you feeling? So our reality is constructed through all our sensory data. And so very early on, a person might be constructing they're unlovable because of the way they're being treated. So their thoughts are going to match their feelings. And that's their construction of reality. And so a narcissist's construction of reality is not going to change because they're always going to construct it the way they construct it. Doesn't matter what logical argument you put to them. Doesn't matter how much you say they're hurting you or doing whatever. They're not wired like you. It's like two different – it's like if a French person was sitting over there and we knew no French and we wanted to find our way to the bakery and we said, can you please direct me to the bakery? And they go, I don't understand. They hold up their hands and they look at you non-verbally and say, I don't understand. And we've got no way of translating that, but we show them a picture. We point at it, maybe they'll start to get it, yeah? So the narcissist is like this person who really doesn't get you and you don't get them. Now, you kind of can be pointing at what they're doing is not okay, but their construction of reality doesn't allow them to accept that because you're challenging their identity. That's why they don't go to therapy. That's why they don't do these things. Even if they do, it's because of you, because you made them or they're trying to help you or change you.
And they'll turn that into something anyway.
They do.
Right? Yeah.
So the reality is when we've got two different sets of wiring, two different realities that are very different, either you understand theirs or they understand yours. It's actually easier for you to understand theirs. Of course, if you see me, I can explain this to you how it works because I grew up with one of these people. I lived this life and I learned how to manage them when I was a very young person. So that's part of my background. I've lived this life, as a victim of this. Not one parent, two.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. So I understand how they work.
Can I ask, because what does it look like to have two narcissists in a relationship? How does that dynamic work?
Yeah, it can work. It's very painful, and you're an appendage. You're an appendage to them. You're an extension of their needs. Yeah.
But how do two narcissists meet each other's needs? Because
there'd
be a power struggle.
There is, yeah. They don't meet each other's needs. The only reason they stay together often is out of some kind of not wanting to look bad.
Yeah, okay.
So, I can't get divorced because that'll look bad for me, so therefore I'll stay in this relationship and I'll cheat my backside off or I'll do this, I'll do it. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So at the end of the day, as a child growing up in this type of environment, I had two choices. And I remember when I was 12, I made that choice. I can either be like them because I know how they work and I know what they do, or I can completely rebel against them, which is what I did. And that's another profile, actually. It's called the Wily Wolf, where you grow up in these environments but you choose a different path consciously.
Yeah.
So you don't turn out like them. You start out like them, but you change because you realise you don't want to be like them. But the force of your will is so strong to not be these people that you make every effort in your life to learn how not to be like them. However, the interesting thing is you still know how they work. You have the blueprint. Got that learning. Yeah, I have the blueprint to their operating system. Yeah. So I know what motivates them. I know how they work. I know what works with these people.
But you're insightful enough to be able to consciously choose a different path.
Yes, and I have. I've chosen a different path. It took years and years to change a lot of things, to be a person that can properly, work on the good side of the force, not be a dark Jedi. Sorry, George. But at the end of the day, even in my opinion, they're still not dark Jedi. Really, they were victims of their own circumstances, their own inability to have knowledge about things. I still have a relationship with one of them, although I have very, very strong boundaries around that person. I don't cut them out of my life because I can manage them. I know how it works, so I know how to manage them. However, if you've not got the blueprint and you think they're like you and you think they think like you, well, you'll be disappointed every time. And therefore, that's why people come to me, because I have the blueprint. And I have the lived experience of that blueprint, not just a psychology book.
I think that makes it even
I have the lived
more
experience
powerful,
of it.
doesn't it? Because you understand the DNA of it.
Absolutely.
Experientially.
Yeah. I've lived it and I know how they operate. And one of my parents is still to this day being the same, hasn't changed, and they don't change.
Well, they couldn't.
No.
Given what we've just discussed.
One's passed on and one's still kicking, still getting narcissistic supply of wherever they can. And at the end of the day, I've had to train my wife as well to how this works too. Because being a normally wired person, it's like, oh my God, how did you survive this? They're not like you, love. They're different. You got to start thinking like one of them, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. And she's like, I can't think. That just doesn't. It's not in her wheelhouse, And I've just had the privilege of having both sides of the fence. So I can choose which path I take. And I chose the path of empathy, compassion, because empathy is a learned skill. It's not something you're born with. Empathy is a prefrontal function that you develop based on whether or not it's safe enough to have it. So
that's interesting.
So if you're born in an environment where there's DV, and there was DV in this environment, you're born in an environment, in my environment, where there's narcissism, where there's aggression, there's violence, there's all the horrible stuff that goes on. And all behind closed doors, it's face to the public is wonderful.
Of course.
But behind closed doors, it's a whole, and you're isolated and you're minimised and all that lot that goes on. It's in my science book about all this. And you develop core impressions that you're basically just, they're your only worth. If you're not complying with what they want, you're worthless. Yep. And therefore, you're copping all the beltings because you're not able to live up to their standards, etc. If you grow up in that environment, it's very, very difficult to break out, of that environment until you can get another look at another environment. So when I met a normally wired person, I was completely surprised how they thought. Because I remember that the day, because when you grow up with these horrible people, right, you're always at fault. You are responsible for their whole lives. Everything that ever happened to them was bad is your fault. So you grow up with that from birth. So when you get into a relationship with a normally wired person, and you've tried to change like I did, I'd made quite a lot of changes by then. And I remember I'm driving up the hill and I just met my wife of today. I just met her. And she invited me over to her place. I'm driving up the hill in the old L300 and used to have a few unexplained engine fires. So, I was smoking and doing whatever, and I pull over at the phone box because I need to let it cool down because it was going to burst into flames any minute. And, of course, you got trepidation, Does she want me there? Is what she's telling me the truth? Because they lie. They lie. They construct reality based on their needs. So technically we call it a lie. So you've been lied to your whole life about everything. So when you get into a relationship with a person who doesn't lie, who actually doesn't lie, you don't know that.
Yeah, the doubt will be there, won't it?
Absolutely
It's full of doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm there and I'm at the phone box and I ring up and I say, do you still want me to come over? And she's like, I asked you, didn't I? I'm like, put the phone down. And of course, in my brain, it's like, what's her trick? What manipulation is she trying to pull? What's she up to? Because I learned to live like that. I learned to have to watch everything that people did and work out who was trying to manipulate me, who was trying to scam me, who was trying to do bad things to me. Because if I didn't, I got hurt.
That's your survival mechanism.
That's my survival. I learned that. I learned those things well. Hence, I can read body language and all that quite naturally. And when I got there, what she said was true. And you know how many years it took me to actually trust another human being? 15. To actually say, I can completely trust you with everything. Because in your DNA, in your wiring, you'd been so wired that way, to not trust. And you'd made this choice that you were going to trust, that you were going to be different from what you grew up with. And so it was a constant struggle, And so all the stuff that I've done, my models, my profiles, it all comes out of this place of having to work people out for survival. Not just because, it's
not
Tuesday
an intellectual exercise to you, is it?
No, not at all. It's a real thing that I've had to do. I've had to work it out. I've had to understand people real quickly, like not like, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that, and blah, blah, blah. I need to know what you are straight away.
Yep.
I need so that I can be safe and possibly, not get hurt. And so over the years, as I said, I developed this way of seeing the world and living in the world where I live in the now primarily. Now I live in the now, The past is gone. It's a memory, because it is a memory. And I could take the learning lessons out of there. That's all that's useful for that. And the future's uncertain and I can't predict it. I don't have a crystal ball and I'm not psychic, although I do like to have a little bit of fun around that area. I won't go into that.
That's a
Darren Brown thing. Yeah? It's a Darren Brown thing. But anyway, so, I had to learn that, I couldn't rely on my own construction of reality for the future, because otherwise I'll be constantly worrying about things, because anxiety is really like future worries, yeah. So I had to back up.
Can we just come back to that for a second?
Yeah.
Because I always say in my function, I call it a job, but I don't feel like I work, half of what I do in my life is managing the emotions of other people.
Yes.
Even though technically I'm doing something for you, I'm making it happen. What somebody asked me, what do you actually do? And I said to them, I manage the emotions of other people. And a lot of those emotions are exactly what you just said. That's why I stopped for a moment. Anxiety. And you voiced it beautifully. It's based around an expectation of something that should happen in the future, which we can't predict.
That's it.
Whether there is something will happen. Yeah. Now, we're going to do our darndest to try to make sure you get a great outcome. And it's not a straight line. But the art form is to navigate that, to go, we know we want to be over here, David. It's okay. Because we'll do this together, and likely it's not going to be a straight line. But that's cool, because I've been down the path many times before, and we'll just navigate it. And there'll be stuff that might come up that I've never seen. But don't worry about it. We'll sort it. What do you say to people who live in anxiety?
What do I say? Everyone, to a degree, lives in anxiety, because it's a natural threat response. So there's different kinds of anxiety, but let's just break it down into two types, let's say. There's anxiety based on biological, environmental factors. So we're sitting in a podcast room here right now, and suddenly a lion walks through the door for some reason that we haven't constructed or smoked or anything like that, right?
By the way, that'd be really cool if that happened.
Yeah.
Just saying,
That's a good
I
way
don't
of
feel
looking
like
at it.
I would be anxious. I'd be like, dude, this is so cool.
Well, I think that's a logical response from your prefrontal functioning. I almost guarantee you your primitive response would be, oh my God, freeze. You'll first freeze and then you'll be going,
why is my pants wet?
My heart rate will rise and my breathing will get shallow, and I'll have a physiological response to a predator. Because it's a predator, it could kill you, and it's a real threat. So that's a real threat, and we have a response to that. Then you got what we might call psychological threats. So it's a thought. And a thought creates the same response. But our nervous system doesn't treat them any differently. Treats them exactly the same. So that's why people ruminate. That's why they keep expanding those thoughts, because they're actually having a physiological response to what their nervous system is perceiving is a real threat when it's not. It's a what if. It's a thought threat, right? So what I say to people when they're anxious, I'm going to ask them, I ask questions. I don't tell people stuff. Because when you ask questions, they've got to think about it, right? When you tell people stuff, they generally don't tend to encode it, especially if they're in shock or they're afraid. because part of my work is a critical incident responder. I actually do that as well. And so when someone's in shock or afraid and, something bad's happened, I'm not going to say, oh, calm down, you're anxious. I'm going to say, where's the danger? Where is it? Where is it right now? And they're sitting in a room with you or somewhere, and there's no danger. I'm asking where it is. It's in my head, that's right. And so where's your evidence that that's going to happen? Where's your evidence? Tell me what's going to happen, or how you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that what you're thinking about is going to happen. I feel it. Are feelings real, or are they just a response to a memory? Because everything we do is in response to a memory of what we've constructed, and we've then attached it to a feeling. That's it. It's literally it. So I will ask them about, what's the likelihood of that happening? What's the likelihood that's going to happen? And how do you know? How do you know that's going to happen? What tells you that? Oh, it happened 20 years ago one time. Oh, does that mean it's going to happen again? What's the likelihood of that? Oh, I don't know. So what I then say is, we've got to deal with your symptoms, because the symptoms in the body has these feelings, right? Feelings are what you get in the body. Emotion is the energy and motion of the feeling. It's different to feelings, and it's what accumulates. Yeah. So they're accumulating emotion now. The feelings are building up. And so we've got to get rid of that. So we're going to use the body for that, because it's actually in the body that we get rid of the anxiety, not in the head. You can't fix a feeling with a thought. It's impossible. You fix a feeling with another feeling. So, and again, there's a lot of science in this, right? So I'm going to say, hey, look at the roof. Tell me how many dots you can count on the roof, if there are dots on the roof. And they'll go 1, 2, 3. What sounds around the room do you hear? I want you to really push your feet into the floor and tell me where your head goes when you do that. And they'll start using their sensory data to put new data into their brain that's not anxiety.
Yep.
And slowly but surely the anxiety comes down. And then once they're calm enough, we might have another discussion about the reality of that, and their appraisal will be better. When they're anxious, their appraisal is usually not good. So to use my dating coaching example, if you'd like me to use that, this is one I use all the time in my workshops, and this is real life stuff. This is what I've done and maybe still do. We'll see how many socially anxious people want to do that. And so let's say I've got a lad, or he's a lad, I have to say it's a lad, and he wants to talk to someone over there, and he gets awfully nervous. They're 20 metres away, and we're in a, I don't know, let's say we're in a bar. Not that I work in bars, but let's pretend we're in a bar for a minute. And he gets this feeling in his body of anxiety, right? Immediately he's going to want to kill that pain, because technically the same part of the brain that processes physical pain processes emotional pain. So he has learnt that if I put something in my body, pain will die. So he wants to go to the bar and have 20 tequila slammers so he can get his confidence up. Now, if I allow him to do that, he's actually lowering his tolerance to that pain artificially.
Yep.
So the more you artificially lower your tolerance to that feeling, the less able to cope with that feeling you become. In other words, next week he might not even go out because, oh my God, I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to get this and that and that, because he has never dealt with the pain, because you've got to feel it to heal it, right? You've got to feel it to heal it. So if he's with me, he's already learned about body language. He's already learned about signs of attraction. He's already learned about echo technique, advanced echo technique. He's already learned, oh my God, I could go on. He's learned about 3 magic question protocol, and I've modelled it all. I just haven't talked to him. I've shown him in real life how it works. So he's seen with his senses that I've done it. I'm going to say to my lad, I want you to walk over there and go through your magic question protocol. So you know what the hardest thing for that person to do will be? Walk 20 metres. That's it. Isn't that interesting? To walk 20 metres, or maybe 10 metres or 5, right? So he walks, he has his conversation, 5 minutes worth, comes back, still feeling anxious and nervous, but he's done it, right? And I'll say to him, how did it go? And his appraisal will be, oh, it's terrible. Or, this happened, that happened, or I thought this, or I stumbled that. So his appraisal's still based on his feelings, right? Is it based on the reality? That's interesting. Now, I've been observing, so I know what the reality is, and he actually knows the reality too, but it'll be based on how he feels. So I'll say, and he knows all the stuff I'm going to talk about, I'll say, well, what was your proximity like? And he'll go, oh, it was good. Oh, what does that tell you? Oh, it tells me that the person was engaged. Interesting. How were their feet pointing? Oh, they were pointing to, what does that tell you? And I'll say, what was their orientation like? You know, and I'll start asking questions that back up reality that the conversation was actually going really well, because the other person has no idea he's anxious. No idea at all. And he'll start to go, oh, right, that, and then we'll talk about the verbals, the link, because I'm always listening. I'm literally there. I'm listening. And I'll say, and did you notice that they said this, or did you notice that they said that? Or what did they say when you said that? And he'll tell me, and I'll go, so how did that go? He's like, oh, actually it went well. Oh, interesting. So what you're telling me is that when you went over there and you're terrified of rejection and being judged, and you went over there and you talked to this person, you still felt that you were being terrified and you were rejected and judged and you came back. However, it's actually different. Your understanding is different. What's all that based on, old hell? And you go, well, a feeling, because I've drummed this into him. Yeah, it's a feeling. And a feeling's always correct. No. The nervous system is just going on a past memory. It could happen when you were 5, and it's attached all that to that. However, right now, is that a reality? How did that go? Oh, we went quite okay. And he goes, I can do another one after that. He will. And I go, okay, I want you to do 5 more, and we'll go through the same process. By 100 walk-ups, he has no social anxiety, 0, none, cured, fixed, completely. Takes 100, roughly, to fix it. Where his appraisal, when he starts the thing, will be, I don't care about the outcome, it's okay. Remember, blessed are those without expectation?
Yep.
I have those for a reason. So I'll say, what's your expectation of this? What if you didn't have an expectation? What if and I always talk about intention, because everything's about intention. What's your intention when you have this conversation? Is your intention to just be curious about the person, which is what I want? That's the best intention. Is the intention to get a phone number? Is the intention to have a conversation? What's the intention? And I go, I don't know. Well, if you don't know the intention, how are you even going to start the conversation? Oh, so they have to start thinking about an intention. Once they think about an intention, and I'll drum it into people just to be curious about people, just to talk to them, just talk to anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. Social anxiety, doesn't matter who you talk to. It's still the same visceral experience. And so once his intention is, just to be curious, and he doesn't have an expectation of the outcome as best as he can, it doesn't matter. If that person tells you to go away, in an unpleasant way, you just ask them if that's your best pickup line, but that's another story. But basically, it's called playful funny. It's a different response, yeah. But basically, if he's got no intention, he's got a good intention, sorry. However, he's got no expectation of the outcome because his intention is just to have a conversation. People can read that. They actually read you unconsciously. So 9 times out of 10, people just talk to him and have a great time, and it's fine, But if he has his intention, he wants something from him. Oh, I like you. I'm attracted to you. Oh, I want something. He goes up. He's all nervous. He's this, he's that. That's been read. So this thing called anxiety, back to what we were talking about, anxiety is really just fear based on an expectation, based on a memory that was recorded some time ago that's already been reconstructed. And so we've just held on to that because it was quite painful. And our nervous system just wants to keep going back there because it doesn't want to go back into that situation. So you ask people questions. You ask them about, where's the fear? What's that? Where's the danger? Is that person dangerous? Are they dangerous? I'll say, is that person, do they look dangerous? No. Well, what's the fear about? What's the fear about? So getting them to tell me what it is, And then when they've done the process, the review is just basically asking them what they noticed, what they experienced. Did they see this? Did they see that? Did they notice this? What was their head doing? Oh, it's blank. I don't remember what I was doing up in my head. Well, although you still managed to have that conversation, did that person tell you to nick off? No. Well, how'd that go? What was your original expectation? To woo them, to get engaged on the spot. What was it? So it's really, when people have anxiety, it's really about getting them to feel the feeling, understand that the feeling is a memory, and it's based on a past construction, and they'll have an expectation it's going to happen in the future, and you just ask them about the reality, and you get rid of the symptoms by getting them to ground themselves and to get into the now, and then you re-go over the information or the questioning. And most people will come out of that process quite okay. They just have to repeat that over and over and over again, because there's no such thing as confidence at all. There's just doing something over and over and over again until you get good at it. Hence 100 walk-ups.
Well, everything takes, we call it practice in what we do. If you want to do that really well, you got to do it 100 times, 10,000 times, whatever.
You do. Yeah. You do. David Schneider will always say, when I was on his course, he'd say, if you don't do the drills, you don't get the skills. And it's true. And that's what I say to my students too. If you don't go and practice this stuff with your mum, with your dad, with your girlfriend, with your partner, with the coffee person, talking to them, having these conversations, reading the body language, working out an appropriate appraisal of how that went, you're just not going to get better at it. You can't think about something and fix it. Thinking doesn't fix stuff, only doing.
I love that. That comes from I say I'm a doing person. You might have a different opinion of that.
No opinion. But, no opinion whatsoever. I just don't. I don't form an opinion.
I love that. Do we have time, or do you have time, not in great detail, but just to give us, what are those 16 personality types, if I could call it that? You'll have better language around it than I do. Is that too much of a big question? Because I'm asking that out of ignorance. I don't know.
No, that's okay, because they're unique. I wrote them, and there's nothing there like them. I actually got online and did that AI check, for anything that's even similar to what I've got, and it's zero. So there's nothing like it. Look, the 16 is a breakdown of, there's a primary profile, a secondary and tertiary. So they will be, but there's 6 main ones, and then there's breakdowns, and then there's what I call hidden profiles. Hidden in plain sight is the series. I'm the behaviourist, spelt in the American way without the U, right? The behaviourist. So the first profile type we call a domain is a calculating type. So it includes my hidden calculatings, like my psychopaths, my wayward calculatings, my sociopaths, or my DV, people who commit, they're quite nefarious. And then we've got another type of calculating called a reluctant calculating, and that's a person who's been exposed to that stuff and has taken on some of those traits. I often see that in people who are living with someone with DV, and they start to think and act like that for their own survival, because they have to. They have to think like their perpetrator.
Yep.
And so, if you look in history, some of those people have actually, murdered their perpetrator. So that's our main calculating types. Yeah. And so the next lot of profiles are my queen profiles. So my queen profiles are, and look, they're primarily male and female, although they can be other. I have some of my ladies that are wolves profiles, but normally they'd be a male profile, but they're a wolf for whatever reason. So it's not necessarily cut in stone. Everything's adaptable. See, what I always say is human beings adapt. They adapt. So you might be born or in your early years become one profile. However, you might adapt traits of another profile, and even another profile for your survival, for your biological survival, because all human beings are looking for resources, to meet physical resources, get their physical resources met, and their emotional needs met. I call it emotional evolution. So the profiles are about emotionally evolving, through your behaviour traits that you don't like, that come with your profile, that you resort back to, and evolving through those with your conscious mind, doing the work that is taken. And also, intimate partner profiling means that one profile type might not go well with another profile type. So I often see this: a wolf and a wolf and it might get together with a sporty profile, and they just don't work out, because the wolf's got too many expectations about certain things and the sporty likes her freedom. So they just don't match. So queens are my next sort of profile. So there's our guarded queens and there's our caretaker queens, and you'll know your caretakers because they're the ones that are always looking after everyone. They're amazing profile. And so the guarded queens. Guarded queens are more my business people, my career-focused people. And it doesn't mean to say that the guardeds can't become caretakers and the caretakers can't become guardeds, because they do. Then there's another kind of queen called an Electra, which I cannot go into. That's a hidden profile. It's a very interesting profile, that one. I have been asked to release the hidden profiles, and I will do that. So the Electras will eventually come out. But they're a match. They're a mixture between different profiles. But it's a bit tricky, but they are technically a queen. All right. So then I've got my wolf profiles. Yeah. So my wolf profiles are there's a general wolf, because there's always a general one. So that's part of the 16. There's a general, and there's usually 2 adaptations or maybe 3, another hidden one. So the general wolves are my lone wolves, and you'll know them: Harley Davidson, Sunset, Pack of One, riding off, lone wolf. And the weird thing is, when people read the profile and they find out who they are, like who they relate to, they just relate to it. But they might not necessarily relate to the other profiles. However, their partner might be another profile. So, one of my wolves has a queen as a partner. He's trying to understand his queen. So I help him, make sense of that. So my lone wolves, and then I've got my brooding wolves. Oh, my God, my brooding wolves. Again, they're a very interesting profile. Then I've got my wily wolves, which, again, is a hidden profile. So some of us in this room may fit there or not. Okay, so then we're going down to, I think we'll do our subtle profiles. So I've got my sporty subtles, that's primarily a female profile, and my classic subtles. Yeah, classic subtles are very, very, very balanced profile. Sporty's very outgoing. I won't say more because you can read all about them. And so that's our subtles. And then, of course, there is another subtle in there, and this one we haven't decided on a name for. We've been working on a name for a particular subtle. We're still working on a name, because my wife gives me the female perspective, so it's not just from me. I have a female perspective in all of this as well. Yeah. So she and I have been debating on this next kind of subtle profile. We haven't decided yet. Then I've got my charmers. So I've got my leisurely charmers and my turbos. Yes. So that's primarily kind of male profiles, and then there might be another hidden profile in there. And then finally I've got my dramatics in there somewhere. So, and dramatics come in 2 types. They come in, it's a spectrum, so they come in my general dramatic, which everyone's got a bit of drama in them, so they can all come in there. Yep. We have a bit of it in there, but then we've got our narcissistic dramatics, which are right at the end of the spectrum. And there's some other profiles in there that we're working on. But the main primary 6 in their adaptations are out. The dramatics are just about to be released, actually. So,
an interesting pile of things you've got there, Dave.
Yeah, well, we've got our calculators out, we've got our wolves out, we've got our queens out, we've got our subtles out, we've got our charmers out, so our turbos and our leisurelies, and then the dramatics are just about to come out.
So what do you do with all of this? Well, not in the past. What do you do now?
People come to me to work out about their partner. Okay. And about themselves, and they hear about my profiles and they like them, and they say, hey, I want to, because my profiles are intimate partner profiles. So I in the profile will be how your partner's going to see things, how they're going to act, what they might do, how they might see the world, what their values might be. So all of my queens will have very similar values, truth, honesty, respect, transparency. And I'll say, I'll bet you your partner, if they're a queen, and they won't know, I'll just say, oh, it's a wolf, I've probably got a queen. I'll say, I bet you if respect is her highest value or truth is her highest value, oh, that's right. Or I'll say, as a wolves have codes, right? They have a code. They live by their wolf code. But their queens live by rules. rule-based. So the code can be flexible, but the rules are not. Think about it.
There's the rub right there.
There's the rub.
There's
the conflict point in those two profiles. So he might be lying to her, telling her a white lie because he doesn't want to hurt her feelings, but she wants the absolute honest truth. Because queens, trust me, they want it straight. They'll tell you straight. They can have F off written on their forehead. That really can. So they want it straight. But if their wolf is kind of trying to not hurt their feelings, they'll see that as quite an assault to the.
It'll be a betrayal. Why
didn't you tell? You lied. But if they have never discussed this, people just think they know each other, but they don't. We do follow basic patterns, and that's what I've worked out. What our relational patterns are. However, if you don't know your partner, understand how their operating system works, like the car with the red light coming on, you're going to avoid your warranty. And sometimes voided warranty means sayonara, see you later. Yeah. And if you're in relationship with, say, a dramatic profile or a calculating profile, whoa, you could be having some real difficulties in there. And if you're a sporty or any kind of subtle or a queen, and queens caretaker queens always go for broken birds. In other words, they're fixers. So that they'll be attracted to the broken bird, the person who's got some issues, and you're going to pay. But what if you end up attracted to a calculating type or a wayward type, and you're trying to help them, you're trying to fix them, you're trying to make them a better person, make it a better life for them, yet this person doesn't think like you, they don't act like you, they've got a different agenda. Wow, you got troubles.
Yeah, they're going to suck the life out of you.
Yes. And if you don't know this, you can avoid so many problems. And that's why people come to me to either they're looking at a relationship and they want to know the profile. So they'll give me some things. I'll go, it's probably this. So these are probably what you're dealing with. Or they know the profile, they want to make their relationship better, or they're not going well in that relationship and they want to know what to do about it. And I don't do couples work. I just purely go off the profiles that I created.
If there was a person who wanted to know their profile and was curious to know what sort of profile would actually work for me, they could learn that.
Absolutely.
And learn how to identify, actually, that person might work well. And it's not a judgment on good or bad. We're just who we are and people are who they are. But it's to say a person with those traits probably will work better for me.
Probably, yeah. Well, probably, and with different traits, they might not go as well. It's not a cut and dry thing. There's plenty of relationships that work that profiles I probably wouldn't see together working as well, although they can make it work. Again, you can make it work. You really can. It's just, that's why I call it hidden nature, because what I've really done is map your nature. What's your intrinsic nature as a human being likely to be like?
Yep.
Yeah? And nature, I call nature the house, and the house always wins. So at the end of the day, if you're gambling against the house and the house is going to win and you don't know how to count the cards, you're going to lose. And I give you the ability to count the cards. I'm that guy.
Yeah, wonderful.
I'm
the behaviourist.
I'm the behaviourist. I'm the human hacker.
Where can people find you?
Well, they can find me on our website, mymilan.com.au. They can find us on Amazon Books, on Smashwords, on Kobo, with digital books. They just have to look up The Behaviourist. It's the American spelling, so there's no U. And David Szczecinski, they can also look up the author name, but we use The Behaviourist as our moniker. And they just have to look up Hidden Nature, Intimate Partner Profiles, and they will find six volumes. We've sold them as individual volumes because we found not everyone wants to read all the volumes. They might want to only read one. So we've made them quite cheap, and you can just buy each volume. If you're really interested, you can buy all the volumes. You can buy your volume or just one volume. It's up to you. The description gives you an idea of what the volume is.
People can have a look.
And then next year, all the art and the science will be out as a with all the references and everything in it. So you'll have all the bits and pieces about how I got there and how I worked it all out. And that's got a whole bunch about how people operate, like their core impressions, their emotional drivers, all this kind of really interesting stuff that comes from all over the sphere that we talked about earlier on. And the hidden profiles will also be coming out as well.
Great.
And finally, there will be a storybook that is a storybook about how the profiles interact as people. But they're animals. I've made them animals because it's about nature. So there's actually a whole story with every profile in it and how they interact and what they might do and what they're likely to say and act like. And that's half written now too. So there's quite a lot there for people to have a look at.
Interesting reading.
It will be, yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
It was really
Appreciate
a pleasure and quite insightful.
Thank you.
Thanks.